March is Women's History Month, and out at the historic Wendover Airfield, they are celebrating the contribution of women to the war effort 80 years ago. While many of the men were involved in bomber training, including for the mission that dropped the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the women played critical supporting roles.
Do you think they realized the magnitude of their contributions at the time?
Probably not. I think they were just there to focus and just to do what they needed to do to get the war done and over with. So
it's a step back in time for reenactor Michelle Murphy to when there were 20,000 people stationed at Wendover Army Air Base. 2,000 of them were women.
You know, it's just like all the other people that served here, not only here but around the country. And
so first of all, there were the WASPs, the Women Air Force Service Pilots.
Landon Wilkie is the curator of the historic Wendover Airfield Museum.
These women were tasked with ferrying aircraft from production facilities to bases, so men didn't have to be taking up time moving aircraft just to move the aircraft for logistics.
But the women also saw their fair share of live action training, which may leave you scratching your head a little.
Because they were deemed maybe a little more expendable, one of their other tasks was they would fly tow planes. They would drag a target behind them on a cable, and folks on the ground with anti-aircraft or other aircraft in the sky would be shooting at these towed targets.
Not for the faint of heart.
And they were going to retire it because it was so tattered, and my dad, who was the fire chief, asked him if he could have it.
As a young boy, Lynn Kenley lived here on base with his family from 1942 to 1964. His sister was a telephone operator whose job it was to connect calls and then get off the line.
And one night she was just a little bit slow closing and heard two people speaking in German. And they always had an FBI agent in the telephone office, always, 24/7. And she motioned him over to listen to what she can, and found out it was a couple of spies trying to do some espionage.
Here on base?
On the base.
One other act of espionage at Wendover resulted in the deaths of 2 maintenance workers and the destruction of a B-24.
Apparently they put what they called a fire stick in one of the cowls of the engine, and that started the oil, which started the magnesium in the engine and everything, and you can't put magnesium out. It just keeps burning.
During that time, Wendover Army Air Base averaged 1.5 crashes a day. The base hospital was busy.
So this whole block was the hospital complex. We had a 300-bed hospital here at Wendover Army Air Base. So most of the buildings are still standing. This is the original paint.
Really?
Yeah. So this is one of the least touched buildings in these 80 years since the war ended. So here we have our original nurses' quarters for the base. At its peak, we had a record of 17 nurses here at any given time. They all would have had their own private room.
Much better than the barracks where most of the personnel on base stayed. Wendover recently obtained a Douglas C-54 Skymaster, which was used as a troop transport. Flight nurses accompanied the wounded back home from overseas.
This could carry 24 patients on stretchers like this, stacked 4 high throughout the fuselage. So there were almost 2 million soldiers transported by air evacuation before the end of the war. And those flight nurses are the ones who kept them alive in the air. They lost very few in transit.
Despite not having many of the benefits available to regular military, despite being considered less than in many cases, despite being stereotyped and soft-pedaled and blatantly discriminated against by today's standards, still the women of World War II at Wendover Army Air Base did their patriotic duty and served with distinction and honor.
So there's just a whole bunch of gratitude and thankfulness for them. So, and humbleness, and very humble to have them serve for us and so that we can be free.
Women made up only 10% of the population at Wendover back then, but their influence and contribution were immeasurable. If you'd like to see for yourself what those women did out there, the Women's History Month tours are every Friday and Saturday until the end of the month. Just call the airfield for times and reservations.